The wedding vows tasted like ash in her mouth. Elena Whitmore stood at the altar in a borrowed gown, her hand clasped in the iron grip of a man whose eyes held nothing. No warmth, no recognition, not even contempt. Just cold, gray emptiness. Duke Alaric Thornfield looked at her the way one might examine a ledger, necessary, transactional, temporary. When the priest asked if he took her as his wife, his answer came flat and final. I do. Not a promise, a signature on a contract written in her family's desperation. As they turned to face the half-empty cathedral, he leaned close enough that she could feel the chill radiating from him. My heart died years ago, he whispered. Don't expect to find it. Elena's spine stiffened. She had walked into this knowing she was being sold, but she hadn't expected to feel quite so purchased. This is the story of how a woman refused to freeze in a house built on ice, and how she shattered every wall that dared to stand in her way. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The carriage ride to Thornfield Manor was silent except for the creak of wheels and the occasional snap of the driver's whip. Elena sat across from her new husband, her hands folded in her lap, her wedding bouquet already wilting in the cold air that seemed to follow him everywhere. She'd tried to meet his gaze once. Just once. He'd looked out the window instead, jaw set, expression carved from stone. She wondered if he even remembered her name. The Whitmore estate had been crumbling for years, but the final collapse came swift and brutal. Her father's gambling debts, her brother's failed investments, creditors circling like vultures. And then, like a dark miracle, came the offer. Duke Alaric Thornfield would settle every debt, restore the family name, ensure her younger sisters had dowries, if Elena would marry him. No courtship, no negotiation, just a sum of money and a date. Her mother had wept with relief. Her father wouldn't look her in the eye. Her brother called it a necessary sacrifice. Elena had simply nodded, signed her name, and prepared herself to disappear into someone else's life. But she hadn't expected this. Thornfield Manor rose from the mist like a monument to something long dead. Gray stone, sharp towers, windows like hollow eyes. The gardens were overgrown in places, meticulously trimmed in others. No rhyme or reason, as if the groundskeepers had given up halfway through and nobody had noticed. Or cared. The carriage stopped. Alaric stepped out first, not offering his hand. Elena climbed down herself, her wedding dress catching on the door. She tugged it free, a small rip forming along the hem. Fitting. The household staff stood in a rigid line at the entrance. No smiles, no warmth. Just a row of faces that looked like they'd been trained to feel nothing. At the front stood an older woman, tall and severe, her hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her skin. Mrs. Grimsby, Alaric said, his tone clipped. My wife. Show her to her rooms. Her rooms, not our rooms. Mrs. Grimsby's eyes flicked over Elena with the efficiency of someone cataloging inventory. This way, Your Grace. Elena glanced back at Alaric, but he was already walking in the opposite direction, his coat billowing behind him like a shadow with a grudge. She hadn't expected him to carry her over the threshold. This wasn't that kind of marriage, but she also hadn't expected to be dismissed like a package delivered to the wrong address. Mrs. Grimsby led her through corridors that smelled of old wood and older secrets. Portraits lined the walls. Men and women with sharp features and sharper eyes, all of them watching, judging. The silence was so thick it pressed against her ears. The Duke prefers order, Mrs. Grimsby said without turning around. Meals are served promptly. The East Wing is private. You are not to enter without permission. The children are under the care of their governess and are not to be disturbed. Elena's steps faltered. Children? Mrs. Grimsby stopped, her expression unchanged. The Duke's daughters. Lady Rosalind is 8. Lady Beatrice is 6. They take their meals in the nursery and retire early. You will meet them when the Duke deems it appropriate. I'm their stepmother now, Elena said, more to herself than to the housekeeper. Shouldn't I? The Duke will inform you when your presence is required. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena's room, her room, singular and isolated, was at the far end of the West Wing. It was large, impersonal, and cold, despite the fire struggling in the hearth. The bed was made with military precision. The wardrobe stood empty except for a few plain dresses that had been provided for her. No personal touches, no warmth. Just four walls and the understanding that she was a guest in her own marriage. Mrs. Grimsby left without another word. Elena stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, and felt the full weight of what she'd agreed to settle over her like snow. She'd known it wouldn't be a love match. She'd prepared herself for indifference, even coldness. But this was something else. This was erasure. She wasn't a wife. She was a transaction that had been filed away. She walked to the window. The view overlooked the rear gardens, wild and tangled, and beyond them a dark line of forest that seemed to swallow the horizon. Somewhere in this house were two little girls who had lost their mother. Somewhere in this house was a man who had lost… what? His heart? His humanity? Elena pressed her palm against the cold glass. "Well," she whispered to no one, "I didn't come here to disappear." Dinner was served at precisely 7 o'clock in a dining room large enough to host a banquet but set for only two. Alaric sat at the head of the table, Elena at the far end, an expanse of polished wood between them. Candlelight flickered, silver gleamed. Silence reigned. A servant placed soup in front of her, some kind of pale, flavorless broth that looked like it had been boiled into submission. Elena picked up her spoon. Alaric didn't. "You'll find the household runs on a schedule," he said, without looking up from the document spread beside his plate. "Mrs. Grimsby will provide you with a daily outline. Follow it." Elena took a sip of the soup. It tasted like hot water with regrets. "And if I have questions, direct them to Mrs. Grimsby. And if I want to see the children…" His pen paused, just for a second, then continued. "That will be arranged." "When?" "When it's appropriate." Elena set down her spoon, the clink of silver against porcelain louder than it should have been. "I'm their stepmother." "You're my wife." He finally looked up, his gray eyes flat and unreadable. "The children are my concern, not yours. They live in this house, so do I. That makes them my concern." Something flickered across his face, annoyance maybe, or surprise that she'd pushed back. He set down his pen with deliberate care. "Miss Cartwright, their governess, has been with them since birth. She knows their needs, their routines, their temperaments. You do not. Your interference would only disrupt their stability." "Stability," Elena repeated, tasting the word like the soup, bitter and unsatisfying. "Is that what you call locking children away from the world?" "I call it protection." "From what?" His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might actually answer. Instead, he picked up his pen again, returning to his papers as if she'd ceased to exist. "This conversation is over." Elena stared at him across the impossible distance of that table. She could have thrown her soup at him. She could have stood up and walked out. She could have demanded respect, acknowledgement, something. Instead, she picked up her spoon and finished her soup in silence. But inside, a small, stubborn flame began to burn. Sleep didn't come easily in Thornfield Manor. The house creaked and groaned like something alive, and every shadow seemed to hide a secret. Elena lay in her too large bed, staring at the ceiling, and wondered what kind of woman had occupied this space before her. Alaric's first wife, the mother of those hidden children, the woman whose death had apparently frozen this entire house in time. No one had mentioned her name. Not once. The next morning, Elena woke to pale sunlight filtering through heavy curtains. A maid had already been in, fresh water in the basin, a plain gray dress laid out on the chair. The dress fit well enough, though it was clearly chosen for practicality, not style. She supposed that was the point. She wasn't here to be decorative. Breakfast was served in the same dining room. Alaric was already gone. A note sat beside her plate, written in sharp, precise handwriting. "Your schedule is with Mrs. Grimsby. Keep to it." Elena folded the note and tucked it into her pocket. Then she walked straight past Mrs. Grimsby's office and headed for the east wing, the forbidden wing. The corridors here were quieter, narrower, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She followed the sound of faint voices, a woman's low murmur, a child's small reply, until she reached a door slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see a nursery bathed in morning light, toys organized in neat rows, and two little girls sitting at a table with their heads bent over books. The older one had dark hair like her father, pulled into a tight braid. The younger one's hair was lighter, curling at the edges, escaping its ribbons. Both wore identical gray dresses, their posture perfect, their expressions solemn. A woman stood over them, tall, thin, with wire-rimmed spectacles and a mouth that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Miss Cartwright, presumably. Elena raised her hand to knock. I wouldn't. She spun around. A young man stood behind her, maybe 25, with sandy hair and an easy grin that seemed out of place in this house. He wore simple clothes, work clothes, and carried a toolbox. Sorry, he said, lowering his voice. Didn't mean to startle you, but trust me, barging into the nursery unannounced? That's a battlefield you don't want to walk into on your first day. I'm not barging, Elena said, though she was absolutely about to barge. I'm visiting my stepdaughters. Right, the new Duchess. His grin widened. Heard about that. Congratulations on the incredibly warm welcome, by the way. Really heartfelt stuff. Elena couldn't help it. She almost smiled. And you are? Thomas Brennan, estate carpenter, occasional handyman, full-time believer that this place could use a lot more laughter and a lot less whatever this is. He gestured vaguely at the oppressive silence around them. Word of advice? Miss Cartwright reports everything to the Duke, and I mean everything. If you want to meet the girls without starting a war, you'll need to go through proper channels. Proper channels? Elena repeated. You mean beg for permission? More or less. She looked back at the door, at the two small figures bent over their books, and felt that stubborn flame flicker higher. What happened to their mother? Thomas's smile faded. Died in childbirth. Beatrice, the little one, nearly 4 years ago now. And he's kept them locked away ever since? He's kept everything locked away ever since. Thomas shifted his toolbox to his other hand. Look, I've been working here long enough to know the Duke's not a bad man. Just a broken one. And broken men build walls, big ones. Then it's a good thing I'm not afraid of walls. Thomas studied her for a moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. You know what? I think you might actually survive here. Most people don't last a month. Most people probably have a choice, Elena said quietly. He nodded, understanding passing between them. If you need anything the official channels won't give you, find me. I'm usually in the workshop behind the stables, or fixing something that's been broken for years because nobody bothered to mention it. Thank you, Thomas. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen how stubborn Miss Cartwright can be. He tipped an imaginary hat and headed down the corridor, whistling softly. Elena stood there a moment longer, watching the two little girls through the crack in the door. One of them, Rosalind, the older one, glanced up suddenly, her dark eyes meeting Elena's for just a second. Then Miss Cartwright's voice cut through the stillness. Posture, Rosalind. We do not slouch. The girl's gaze dropped back to her book. Elena turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the cold corridor. But she'd seen enough. Those children weren't being protected. They were being buried alive, just like everything else in this house. And Elena had never been good at leaving things buried. The days that followed established a pattern. Alaric would leave early for estate business, return late, and spend his evenings locked in his study. Elena would wake, dress, receive her schedule from Mrs. Grimsby, and then quietly, carefully begin to break it. She started small, asking the kitchen staff about the children's favorite foods, learning the names of the maids, requesting books from the library, books about children, about grief, about how to reach someone who'd forgotten how to be reached. Mrs. Grimsby noticed, of course. Her disapproval radiated like cold fog. But Elena was technically following the rules. She just happened to be learning things while she followed them. On the 4th day, she encountered Alaric in the library. He stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring out at the darkening grounds. He didn't turn when she entered. You've been asking questions, he said. Elena set down the book she'd been carrying. I've been learning about my new home. You've been prying. I've been existing. If that feels like prying, maybe the problem isn't me. He did turn then, his expression hard. I brought you here for a specific purpose, to restore your family's name, to provide legitimacy to this household, not to reorganize it according to your preferences. I haven't reorganized anything. You've been speaking to the staff, requesting changes to menus, asking about the children's routines. I asked what they like to eat. That's hardly a revolution. It's unnecessary. It's called caring. The word hung in the air between them, sharp and unexpected. Alaric's jaw worked, but no response came. Instead, he drained his whiskey and set the glass down with a hard clink. The children are fine, he said, his voice low and final. They're cared for, educated, safe. That's all that matters. Is it? Elena took a step closer. When's the last time you actually spoke to them? Not instructed Miss Cartwright, not reviewed their lessons, spoke to them. As their father, something dangerous flashed in his eyes. You overstep. I'm trying to understand. Then understand this. My daughters are my responsibility, and I will raise them as I see fit. Your role here does not include questioning my decisions. My role, Elena said quietly, is to be your wife. And whether you like it or not, that makes me part of this family. Which means those girls are my responsibility too. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw something crack in his expression. Pain, maybe, or fear. But then it was gone, replaced by that impenetrable coldness. Stay away from the nursery, he said. That's not a request. He walked past her, his shoulder nearly brushing hers, and left the library without another word. Elena stood there, her heart pounding, her hands shaking slightly. She'd pushed, hard, maybe too hard, but she wasn't going to stop. That night, she couldn't sleep. Again. The house felt heavier somehow, pressing down on her from all sides. She slipped out of bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and wandered the corridors with a single candle to light her way. Thornfield Manor was different at night. The portrait seemed to lean closer. The shadows breathed. Every creak sounded like a whisper. She found herself outside Alaric's study. Light showed beneath the door. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. What would she even say? She'd already made her position clear, and he'd made his just as clear. Before she could decide, footsteps echoed down the hall. She turned to see Miss Cartwright approaching, a lamp in hand, her expression as pinched as ever. Your Grace, the governess said, her tone dripping with false courtesy. It's quite late for wandering. I couldn't sleep. Nevertheless, this wing is private. The Duke prefers not to be disturbed. I wasn't planning to disturb him. Miss Cartwright's lips thinned. Of course. However, perhaps it's best if you return to your chambers, for your own comfort. It wasn't a suggestion. Elena held the woman's gaze, seeing calculation there. This wasn't just a governess protecting her employer. This was a gatekeeper guarding territory. Tell me something, Miss Cartwright, Elena said softly. Do the girls ever play, laugh, run in the gardens? The girls are perfectly content with their routine. That's not what I asked. It's not your concern. It's entirely my concern. Miss Cartwright stepped closer, her lamp casting sharp shadows across her face. You've been here less than a week, and already you think you understand this household better than those of us who've served it for years. That's arrogance, Your Grace, or foolishness, perhaps both. Maybe, Elena said. Or maybe I just see what everyone else has gotten used to ignoring. The governess's expression hardened. The Duke knows what's best for his daughters. If you truly cared about them, you'd respect that. Respect, Elena echoed. Is that what you call it? Keeping them isolated? Cutting them off from warmth, from connection, from anything that might make them feel like children instead of little soldiers? You know nothing about what those girls need. Then teach me. Elena's voice rose slightly, frustration breaking through. I'm not trying to replace their mother. I'm not trying to disrupt everything. I just want to know them. Help them. Be what? Miss Cartwright's eyes glittered in the lamplight. Their savior? Their rescuer from the terrible father who's kept them fed, clothed, educated, and safe? How noble of you. The words struck harder than Elena expected. She opened her mouth to respond, but the door to the study swung open. Alaric stood in the doorway, his shirt sleeves rolled up, papers still clutched in one hand. His eyes moved from Miss Cartwright to Elena, taking in the scene with cold assessment. Miss Cartwright, he said quietly, return to your rooms. The governess hesitated, then curtsied stiffly. Your Grace. She swept past Elena without another glance. Alaric turned his attention fully to Elena. In the dim light, his face looked more tired than angry. Shadows carved hollows beneath his eyes. His hair was disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it for hours. "You should be asleep," he said. "So should you." His mouth almost twitched, but the moment passed. Elena. It was the first time he'd used her name. The sound of it stopped her breath. "Elena," he said again, and this time it sounded like exhaustion. "I know you mean well, but this house, it works a certain way. For a reason." "What reason?" He looked away, back into his study where papers were scattered across every surface. Ledgers, contracts, letters. The work of a man trying to bury himself in duty. Control, order, structure. Those things keep us intact. Or they keep you frozen, Elena said quietly. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "Frozen is safer than shattered." The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them. But she did. And suddenly she understood a little more. This wasn't cruelty. This was fear. Fear dressed up in coldness and control. "Alaric?" she said, testing his name. He flinched slightly as if he hadn't heard it spoken in years. "I'm not trying to shatter anything. I'm trying to build something. Here, with you, with the girls, something that's not just survival." "Survival," he said, turning back to face her, "is all I have left to offer. Then I'll take it, and I'll make it into something more." They stared at each other across the threshold of his study, him inside with his walls and his ghosts, her outside with her stubborn hope and equally stubborn refusal to give up. Finally, he stepped back and began to close the door. "Good night, Elena." The door clicked shut. Elena stood there, her candle burning low, and felt the weight of the challenge ahead settle into her bones. He'd built a fortress around himself, around his daughters, around every corner of this house. And fortresses, she knew, weren't built overnight. They also couldn't be torn down overnight, but they could be cracked, stone by stone, wall by wall, starting tomorrow. She turned and walked back to her chambers, her footsteps the only sound in the sleeping house. Behind her, light still glowed beneath the study door, a man who couldn't sleep, working through the night to keep everything in its place. Ahead of her, somewhere in the nursery wing, two little girls slept in their identical beds, locked away in a routine that promised safety but delivered only isolation. And in between, Elena carried her small flame of defiance, refusing to let it go out, because she'd made a bargain when she came here. Not the one her family had signed, not the one Alaric thought he'd purchased. Her own bargain, with herself. She would survive this place, and then, piece by careful piece, she would bring it back to life, even if it killed her, even if it killed them all. The crack in the door came 3 days later, though not in the way Elena expected. She was walking past the music room, a space she'd been told was no longer in use, when she heard it. A single note on the piano, hesitant and soft, followed by another. Then silence. Then the notes again, forming the beginning of something that might have been a melody if the player had the courage to continue. Elena stopped, her hand on the doorframe. Through the gap, she could see small fingers on the keys. Rosalind sat at the bench, her back rigid, her head turning every few seconds toward the door as if expecting to be caught. The girl pressed another key. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. She tried a chord, clumsy, unpracticed, but full of something that sounded dangerously close to joy. Then footsteps echoed down the hall. Sharp, purposeful clicks of expensive shoes on marble. Rosalind's hands flew off the keys. She stood so quickly the bench scraped backward, and by the time Miss Cartwright appeared in the doorway, the girl stood at attention, hands clasped in front of her, face blank. "What are you doing here?" the governess demanded. I thought, this room is off limits, you know that. I just wanted to. Your lessons are in the nursery. Return there immediately." Elena watched Rosalind's small face crumple for just a second before the mask slid back into place. The girl walked past Miss Cartwright without another word, her footsteps quick and quiet. She didn't look at Elena, even though she must have known she was there. Miss Cartwright pulled the music room door shut with a decisive click and locked it. Then she turned and met Elena's gaze with cold satisfaction. "Some things," the governess said, "are better left closed." She walked away, the keys jingling at her belt. Elena stood in the empty corridor, something hot and sharp rising in her chest. Not anger. Worse. recognition. She'd seen this before, this careful pruning of anything that might grow too wild, too alive. Her own mother had done it, in smaller ways, cut the laughter too loud, smooth the dress too wrinkled, present the perfect face even when the foundation was rotting underneath. But Elena had escaped that. She'd been sold into this marriage, yes, but she'd also been freed from the performance of being the perfect, quiet, decorative daughter. Those girls hadn't been freed from anything. They'd been imprisoned by the very person meant to protect them. She found Thomas in the workshop that afternoon, his hands covered in sawdust, a chair leg propped on his workbench. "I need your help," she said without preamble. He looked up, one eyebrow raised. "That was fast. What did you break already?" "Nothing. Yet." Elena closed the workshop door behind her. "The music room. It's locked. I need it unlocked." Thomas set down his tools slowly. "The Duke's orders?" "Miss Cartwright's." "Same thing, really. She doesn't make moves without his approval." He studied her face. "What's in the music room that's got you plotting?" "A piano? And a little girl who wants to play it." Understanding flickered across his features. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You know what you're asking, right? That's not just any locked door. That room hasn't been opened since the first Duchess died. She used to play, apparently. After she passed, the Duke locked it up and told everyone to pretend it didn't exist. So it's a shrine. More like a tomb." Elena felt the weight of that settle. But it didn't change what she'd seen. That flash of life in Rosalind's face, snuffed out before it could catch fire. "Can you open it or not?" Thomas leaned back against his workbench, arms crossed. "I can. Question is whether I should. You're asking me to go directly against the Duke's wishes. That's not just breaking rules, that's treason in this house. I'm not asking you to do it without me. I'll take the blame if it goes wrong." "Oh, it'll go wrong. That's guaranteed." But he was already reaching for a ring of keys hanging on the wall. "You're going to get me fired. You know that. You said this place needed more laughter. I also said I believed in survival. And this? This is not a survival move." He tossed the keys once, caught them, and grinned despite himself. "But I'll admit, it's a hell of a lot more interesting than fixing banister rails. When do you want to do this?" "Tonight, after the household's asleep." "Of course. Why would we do anything the easy way?" He pocketed the keys. "Meet me outside the music room at midnight, and for the love of, well, whatever you believe in, don't bring a candle. We're not trying to announce this to the entire manor." Elena nodded, something like gratitude warming her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until we see if we both still have jobs tomorrow." She left the workshop with a plan forming in her mind. Not just to open a room, but to open something bigger. A crack in the fortress walls. Small, yes, but cracks had a way of spreading. Dinner that night was the usual exercise in barely contained hostility. Alaric sat at his end of the table, Elena at hers, and between them stretched miles of polished wood and even more miles of silence. He'd taken to bringing documents to meals now, barely looking up except to accept the next course. Elena pushed potatoes around her plate and decided to test the waters. "I heard Rosalind playing piano today." Alaric's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "That's not possible. The music room is locked." "She found her way in somehow. She's quite talented." "She has no business in that room." His voice was flat, final. "I'll speak to Miss Cartwright." "Or," Elena said carefully, "you could speak to Rosalind. Ask her why she wanted to play." "I don't need to ask. Children want many things that aren't appropriate. Like music, joy, expression." His jaw tightened. "Like access to rooms that will only cause them pain." "How do you know it would cause pain? Have you asked?" "I don't need to ask what I already know." Elena set down her fork, the clink loud in the silent room. "You're not protecting them. You're suffocating them." Alaric finally looked up, his gray eyes cold and hard. "You've been here less than 2 weeks. Do not presume to tell me how to raise my daughters." "Someone has to." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. The air in the room went very still. Alaric set down his own fork with deliberate care and stood. "This conversation is over. It hasn't even started." "Elena." Her name came out like a warning. "There are boundaries in this house. Learn them, respect them, or you'll find living here far more difficult than it needs to be." He left without another word, his untouched meal growing cold on the table. Elena sat alone in the dining room, her heart hammering. She'd pushed too hard, too fast. She knew that. But watching those girls fade into shadows, watching Alaric bury himself deeper every day, how was she supposed to stay quiet? A maid came to clear the plates, her movements nervous and quick. Elena caught her wrist gently. What was she like? The first Duchess? The maid's eyes went wide. I shouldn't... Please. The girl glanced toward the door, then leaned in slightly. Kind. She was kind. Played piano every evening. Used to sing to the girls before bed. The house felt different when she was alive. Warmer, I suppose. Like it knew how to breathe. She straightened quickly. But that's all I know, Your Grace. Will there be anything else? No, thank you. The maid hurried away, and Elena was alone again with the ghosts of what this house used to be. Midnight came slowly. Elena dressed in dark clothes, her heart beating too fast. She slipped through the corridors like a thief in her own home, every shadow a potential discovery. When she reached the music room, Thomas was already there, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. You're late, he whispered, by 2 minutes. In robbery terms, that's an eternity. He produced the keys, sorting through them by touch. Last chance to back out. Open it. He slid the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, loud as a gunshot in the silence. Thomas pushed the door open slowly, wincing at every creak. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, illuminating a room frozen in time. Sheet-covered furniture cast strange shadows. A harp stood in one corner, its strings likely untuned. And in the center, like a sleeping beast, sat a grand piano draped in white cloth. Elena stepped inside, her breath catching. The air smelled of dust and disuse and something else. Sadness, maybe, or memory. She walked to the piano and pulled the sheet away. Dust billowed up, making her cough, but underneath, the instrument was beautiful. Dark wood polished to a mirror shine. Keys that looked like they'd been ivory once. She pressed a single note. The sound rang out, clear and true and achingly lonely. It's still in tune, she whispered. The Duke had someone maintain it, Thomas said from the doorway. Even after he locked the room. Every 6 months, a tuner comes. Does his work? Leaves. The Duke never comes in. Just makes sure it's ready. For what, I don't know. Elena ran her fingers over the keys without pressing them. Ready for what? For the woman who would never return? For the day he finally let himself grieve? For some future that would never come because he'd locked it away along with everything else? He loved her, she said quietly. More than anyone thought possible. When she died, it broke something in him, something that never healed. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. Look, I helped you get in here, but we should go. If anyone finds us... Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. They both froze. Thomas's hand flew to the lamp he'd left unlit, ready to snuff even the moonlight if needed. Elena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. A small voice, barely a whisper. Is someone there? Elena's breath released in a rush. She moved to the door and opened it wider. Rosalind stood in the hallway in her nightgown, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her eyes wide. What are you doing up? Elena asked gently. I heard something. I thought... The girl's gaze moved past Elena to the open music room. Her mouth formed a small O of shock. You opened it. I did, but it's forbidden. Papa said, I know what your papa said. Elena crouched down to the girl's level. But I also heard you playing today, and I thought maybe you'd like to play again, properly, without having to hide. Rosalind stared at her, something like hope flickering in her young face. Then fear crashed back down. Miss Cartwright will tell Papa. He'll be so angry. Not if we're quiet about it. Elena held out her hand. Come, just for a few minutes, before anyone else wakes up. The girl hesitated, torn between desire and fear, a conflict no 8-year-old should have to navigate. Then, slowly, she placed her small hand in Elena's. They walked into the music room together. Thomas stepped aside, his expression unreadable. Rosalind approached the piano like someone approaching a shrine, her fingers reaching out but not quite touching. My mama used to play this, she whispered. I remember. Just a little. She'd let me sit on her lap and press the keys. She said, I had good hands for music. You do, Elena said. I heard you today. I wasn't very good. You were curious. That's better than good. That's how all beautiful things start. Elena pulled out the bench. Play something for me now. Anything you want. Rosalind sat down, her feet not quite reaching the floor. She placed her hands on the keys with something close to reverence. Then she played, the same hesitant melody from earlier, but fuller now, braver. She stumbled over notes, got the rhythm wrong, had to start over twice, but her face glowed with concentration and something else, something that looked like joy breaking through ice. When she finished, she looked up at Elena with shining eyes. That was one of Mama's songs. I don't know the name, but I remember the sound. It's beautiful. Papa doesn't like to remember. Miss Cartwright says it hurts him too much. So we don't talk about Mama. We don't come in here. We pretend like... Her voice caught. Like she never existed. Elena's throat tightened. That's not pretending. That's forgetting. And forgetting someone you love doesn't make the hurt less. It just makes the love disappear too. Do you think Papa knows that? I think your Papa is trying very hard to keep everyone safe. He just doesn't realize that you can't protect people by locking them away. Rosalind's small fingers traced the piano keys without pressing them. I miss her. Is that allowed? Of course it's allowed. Miss Cartwright says I'm too young to really remember, that I should focus on my lessons and being proper and not dwelling on things I can't change. Miss Cartwright, Elena said carefully, is very good at many things, but she's wrong about this. Missing someone means they mattered, that they were real, that they left something behind worth remembering. The girl nodded slowly, then looked back at the piano. Could I come back? To practice? I promise I'll be quiet. I won't tell anyone. You can come back, Elena said firmly. Anytime you want. But Papa, I'll handle your Papa. Thomas made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. Rosalind looked between them, uncertainty and hope warring in her expression. You should get back to bed, Elena said gently. Before Miss Cartwright notices you're gone. What about you? I'll lock the room back up, make it look like nothing happened. Rosalind stood slowly, reluctantly. At the door she turned back. Thank you, she whispered. Then she was gone, her small feet pattering away into the darkness. Elena and Thomas stood in the silent music room, the piano still humming faintly from Rosalind's playing. Well, Thomas said finally, that went better than expected. Did it? Nobody died. The house didn't burn down. I'd call that a win. He started replacing the sheet over the piano. But you know this can't stay secret, right? Kids are terrible at keeping secrets, and Miss Cartwright has eyes everywhere. I know. And when the Duke finds out, not if, when, there's going to be hell to pay. I know that too. Thomas paused, studying her in the moonlight. Why are you doing this, really? You could just keep your head down, play the dutiful wife, avoid the conflict. Why risk it? Elena looked around the room, at the covered furniture, the dusty harp, the piano that had been maintained but never played. A room kept perfect and lifeless. A monument to grief that helped no one. Because I'm tired of houses that feel like tombs, she said quietly. Because those girls deserve better than to be taught that love means erasure. Because, she met Thomas's gaze, because I'm here now, and I refuse to be another ghost in these walls. He nodded slowly, something like respect crossing his features. Fair enough. Just do me a favor. What? When the Duke comes for you, and he will, don't throw me under the cart. I've got 3 younger sisters depending on my wages. I wouldn't dream of it. Good. He locked the door behind them, pocketed the keys. Now get back to your room before someone finds us both out here and assumes something far more scandalous than breaking and entering. Elena almost smiled. She slipped back through the corridors to her chambers, her mind already racing ahead to the confrontation she knew was coming. She'd crossed a line tonight, deliberately, irrevocably, and there would be consequences. But when she closed her eyes, she could still see Rosalind's face glowing in the moonlight, her small hands coaxing music from an instrument that had been silent for too long. Worth it, Elena thought. Whatever comes next, it was worth it. The reckoning came sooner than expected. Elena woke to pounding on her door just after dawn. She threw on a robe and opened it to find Miss Cartwright standing there, her face white with fury. "The Duke wants to see you, immediately." Elena's stomach dropped, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'll dress and—" "Now," he said now. She followed the governess through the halls, still in her nightclothes, her feet bare on the cold stone. Staff members pressed themselves against walls as they passed, their eyes carefully averted. Word had spread then. Whatever was about to happen, the whole household knew it was coming. Miss Cartwright stopped outside the study and knocked once. Alaric's voice came through, hard and clipped. "Enter." The governess opened the door, gestured Elena inside, and closed it behind her with a decisive click. Alaric stood behind his desk, his hands braced on the surface, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. And standing next to him, looking small and terrified, was Rosalind. Elena's heart sank. "Tell me," Alaric said, his voice dangerously quiet, "that my daughter is mistaken. Tell me she dreamed that you opened the music room last night and invited her to play." Elena met Rosalind's eyes. The girl looked ready to cry, her small hands twisted together. She'd tried to keep the secret, she really had. But Miss Cartwright had a way of extracting confessions. "She's not mistaken," Elena said steadily. Rosalind made a small sound of distress. Alaric's jaw clenched so hard Elena could hear his teeth grind. "How dare you?" he breathed. "How dare you?" "She wanted to play. She has a gift for it. I don't see the harm in—" "You don't see—" He stopped, visibly controlling himself. "Rosalind, go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment later." "But Papa, Go!" The girl fled, tears streaming down her face. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. Alaric turned his full attention to Elena, and the fury in his eyes made her step back involuntarily. "That room has been locked for 4 years, he said, his voice shaking. 4 years. Do you have any idea, any comprehension whatsoever of what you've done? I've let a child remember her mother. You violated the one boundary I made explicitly clear, the one rule I gave you, and you didn't just break it, you brought my daughter into your rebellion." "She was already there!" Elena's own anger rose to meet his. "She was sneaking into that room on her own, desperate for any connection to the woman you've erased from this house. I didn't put that desire in her. You did, by making her mother a forbidden secret instead of a cherished memory. You know nothing about my wife, nothing about what happened, nothing about—" "Then tell me!" Elena moved closer, her fear giving way to frustration. "Tell me what happened that made you so desperate to bury everything. Tell me why your daughters aren't allowed to grieve. Tell me why this entire house has to live like we're all already dead. Because grief destroys." The words erupted from him, raw and jagged. "It tears you apart from the inside. It makes you weak, vulnerable, useless. I watched my wife waste away, watched her slip through my fingers while I could do nothing, and the pain of it nearly killed me. So yes, I locked that room. I locked away everything that could remind me, of what we lost. Because that's the only way to survive it." "That's not survival," Elena said, her voice breaking. "That's just slow death. It's control. It's order. It's the only thing keeping this family from falling apart. Your family is already falling apart. Rosalind sneaks into forbidden rooms because she's starving for something real. Beatrice barely speaks. You hide in your study 18 hours a day. This house is full of people, and yet everyone in it is desperately, horribly alone." She took a shaky breath. "You didn't save them by locking away your grief. You just locked them away with it." The silence that followed was crushing. Alaric stared at her, his chest heaving, his hands clenched at his sides. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw the walls crack, saw the man underneath the Duke, the father underneath the fortress. Then his face hardened again. "You will never," he said, each word precise and cutting, "open that room again. You will not discuss my late wife with the children. You will not undermine Miss Cartwright's authority, and you will remember that you are here by my grace and my generosity, and both can be revoked." "You'd send me back?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "If necessary." The threat hung between them. Elena felt it like a physical weight, the reminder that she was here because her family needed the money, because she had nowhere else to go, because she was just one more thing he'd purchased and could discard if she proved too troublesome. But she didn't bow her head, didn't apologize, didn't back down. "If you send me away," she said quietly, "it won't change what's broken here. It'll just be one less person trying to fix it." "Nothing here needs fixing. Everything here needs fixing, starting with you." His face went white. For a second, she thought he might actually throw her out right then and there. Instead, he turned away, his shoulders rigid. "Get out," he said. "Alaric, get out." Elena left, her whole body trembling. In the corridor, Miss Cartwright waited with barely concealed satisfaction, ready to escort her back to her room like a prisoner. But as they walked, Elena caught glimpses of staff members watching from doorways, their expressions not triumphant but sympathetic. And in one shadowed alcove, she saw Thomas, his face grave, his hand raised in a small gesture of solidarity. She'd lost this battle, badly, but she hadn't lost the war, not yet, because as she passed the locked music room, she noticed something. The door frame was slightly scuffed, as if someone had been testing it, and underneath, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was a small piece of paper, folded, waiting. Elena didn't stop to pick it up, but she saw it, and she understood. Rosalind had left her a message. The crack in the fortress walls had just gotten a little bit wider. Elena waited until nightfall before retrieving the note. She'd spent the day confined to her chambers, not explicitly imprisoned, but the message was clear when Miss Cartwright posted a maid outside her door to attend to her needs. Translation: to make sure she didn't cause more trouble. But maids had to sleep eventually, and Elena had never been good at sitting still. She slipped out just past midnight, barefoot to muffle her steps, and made her way to the music room. The note was still there, wedged into the doorframe's crack. She unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was childish but careful. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to tell. Please don't leave." Elena's throat tightened. She pressed the paper to her chest for a moment, then tucked it into her pocket. She wouldn't leave, not willingly. But whether Alaric would allow her to stay was another question entirely. She was about to head back when she heard voices, low, urgent, coming from the direction of Alaric's study. She shouldn't have moved closer, should have gone straight back to her room, but curiosity and the stubborn need to understand what she was fighting against pulled her forward. The study door was slightly ajar. Through the gap, she could see Alaric seated behind his desk, a glass of whiskey in hand. And across from him sat a man Elena had never seen before. Tall, well-dressed, with silver-streaked hair, and a face that wore authority like a second skin. "You can't keep running from this, Alaric," the man said. His voice was cultured, controlled, but edged with something harder. "It's been 4 years. People are starting to ask questions. Let them ask." Alaric's voice was rough with exhaustion. "The magistrate reopened the inquiry last month. Did you know that?" Elena saw Alaric's hand tighten around his glass. "On what grounds?" "Anonymous testimony, someone claiming to have information about Catherine's death." The man leaned forward. Information suggesting it wasn't the natural tragedy everyone believed. The air in Elena's lungs turned to ice. Catherine. That was her name. The first Duchess. The woman whose memory had been locked away along with everything else. "That's insane," Alaric said, but his voice wavered. "Catherine died in childbirth. The midwife, the physician, they all confirmed it. And yet someone is claiming otherwise. Someone with enough credibility that the authorities are listening." The man pulled out a document, laid it on the desk. "They want to exhume the body, Alaric. They want a formal investigation." "No." Alaric stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. "Absolutely not. I won't have her disturbed. I won't put my daughters through that circus." "Then give them something else. Proof that there was no foul play. Records, testimony. Something to satisfy the inquiry before it becomes a full inquest." "I have nothing to hide." "Then why are you so afraid?" The question hung in the air. Alaric turned away, staring out the window into darkness. "Because digging up the past doesn't bring anyone back. It just makes the loss fresh again, and I can't—" His voice broke slightly. "I can't go through that again. You may not have a choice." The man stood, gathering his papers. "I'm your solicitor, Alaric, and more importantly, your friend. But even I can't protect you if you won't protect yourself. Find the records. Talk to the staff who were there. Build a defense before someone else builds a prosecution." He left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Elena stood frozen in the corridor, her mind racing. An investigation, anonymous testimony, questions about Catherine's death that suggested something more than tragedy. What had happened in this house 4 years ago, and why did Alaric look less angry than terrified? She started to back away, but her foot caught the edge of a loose floorboard. The creak echoed like thunder. The study door flew open. Alaric stood there, his face haggard in the lamplight, and his eyes met hers with a mixture of fury and something close to despair. "How much did you hear?" Elena's first instinct was to lie. But what was the point? "Enough." He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but firmly, and pulled her into the study, shutting the door behind them. "You have a talent for being where you shouldn't be." "I wasn't spying. I heard voices and decided to eavesdrop on a private conversation about matters that don't concern you." He released her arm, running his hands through his hair. "Do you have any concept of boundaries, any understanding of when to leave well enough alone?" "Apparently not," Elena shot back. "But maybe if you told me the truth from the beginning, I wouldn't have to stumble into it in dark corridors." "The truth?" He laughed, a bitter sound. "You want the truth? Fine. My wife died 4 years ago giving birth to our daughter. The labor was long, complicated. She was already weak from a difficult pregnancy. And when it was over, she was gone, and I was left with 2 motherless children and a hole in my life that nothing has been able to fill. That's the truth. Are you satisfied?" "No," Elena said quietly. "Because that's not the whole truth. If it were, there wouldn't be an investigation. There wouldn't be anonymous testimony. There wouldn't be a solicitor telling you to build a defense." His face went pale. "You don't know what you're talking about. Then explain it to me. Make me understand why someone would accuse you of what exactly? What are they suggesting happened?" "I don't know." The admission came out raw. The letter didn't specify, just vague insinuations, questions about timing, about circumstances, about my behavior in the weeks after her death. "What about your behavior?" He turned away from her, his shoulders hunched. "I fell apart, completely. For months I couldn't function, could barely look at the children without seeing her. The estate nearly collapsed. If it hadn't been for Mrs. Grimsby and my solicitor taking over, we'd have lost everything." His voice dropped. "I wasn't myself. I said things, did things, or rather didn't do things I should have done. And now someone's using that against me." Elena moved closer, her anger softening into something more complicated. "What kind of things?" "I didn't attend her funeral. Couldn't. The thought of watching them lower her into the ground. I broke. Locked myself in this study for 3 days while they buried her without me." He laughed bitterly. "What kind of man doesn't attend his own wife's funeral?" "A devastated one, or a guilty one. That's what they're suggesting, isn't it? That my absence, my behavior, indicates something darker." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were haunted. "I loved her, Elena, more than I thought possible. And when she died, part of me died with her. Everything I've done since, the rules, the control, the distance, it's all been to keep the rest of me from following her into the grave." The confession settled between them like a living thing. Elena felt it in her chest, the weight of his grief, still fresh after 4 years, still bleeding. This wasn't cruelty. This was survival by any means necessary, even if those means were slowly killing everything else. "Who would do this?" she asked. "Who would accuse you?" "I don't know. Someone who was here when she died? A servant with a grudge? A rival trying to undermine my position?" He poured himself another whiskey, drained it in one swallow. "It could be anyone. Everyone in this house knows I failed her, that I wasn't strong enough to save her and not strong enough to properly grieve her afterwards. That's not failure. That's being human." "Being human," he repeated, as if the concept was foreign. "Being human got her killed. I should have insisted on a physician from the city. Should have taken her somewhere with better facilities. Should have done 100 things differently. But I was arrogant. Thought we had the best care here. Thought love and hope would be enough." His hand clenched around the empty glass. "I was wrong." Elena wanted to argue, to tell him he was being too hard on himself, but she'd heard this kind of guilt before, seen it in her father after her mother's first miscarriage, in her brother after his business failed, the kind of guilt that burrowed deep and reshaped everything. "What are you going to do, E?" she asked instead. "What I always do. Control what I can. Protect what remains. He set down the glass. The magistrate wants records. I'll provide them. They want testimony from staff who were present. I'll arrange it. I'll cooperate fully and prove there's nothing to hide. And if that's not enough, it will have to be. But his voice held no conviction. A thought occurred to Elena, dangerous and unwelcome. Where are the records kept? The midwife's notes? The physician's report? Locked in the estate office. Why? Because if someone's making accusations, they might be based on something in those records. Something that looks questionable if you don't understand the context. Or something that actually is questionable. He met her gaze. That's what you're thinking, isn't it? That maybe there's truth to these accusations. No, Elena said firmly. I'm thinking that whoever's doing this knows something, or thinks they do. And if we're going to stop them, we need to know what that is before they can weaponize it. Alaric studied her for a long moment. We? You're my husband. Like it or not, what affects you affects me. This isn't your battle. Everything in this house is my battle now. You made it that way when you brought me here. She straightened her spine. Let me help. Let me look at the records, talk to the staff, find out what really happened. I'm not bound by the same grief you are. I can see things clearly. Or you'll see what you want to see. Evidence of some great injustice you can right. Is that really what you think of me? He didn't answer immediately. Then quietly, I think you're dangerous. Not maliciously, but dangerous nonetheless. You come into this house with your ideals and your determination to fix things, and you don't understand that some things can't be fixed. They can only be endured. And I think you're a coward. The words came out before she could stop them. Not because you're afraid, fear is human, but because you've let that fear turn you into stone. You've sacrificed your daughter's happiness, your own life, everything that matters, all to avoid feeling the pain you're so terrified of. That's not strength. That's just waste. His face went white. For a second, she thought he might order her out, send her back to her family in disgrace. Instead, he sank into his chair like a man twice his age. You're right, he said softly. I am a coward. The admission shocked her more than anger would have. She opened her mouth, but he held up a hand. Tomorrow morning, I'll take you to the estate office. You can review the records, talk to whoever you want, see for yourself what happened. He looked up at her, his eyes empty. And when you find nothing, because there is nothing to find, maybe you'll finally understand why I've built the walls I have, why some doors need to stay locked. Elena nodded slowly. And if I find something, then we'll face it, together. The words seemed to cost him something. But Elena, if you do this, you need to be prepared for what you might discover. About Catherine, about me, about this house. Once you open certain doors, you can't close them again. I know. Do you? He stood, moving to the window. I've spent 4 years trying to protect my daughters from the truth of how brutal and random and unfair life can be. If you tear that protection away, you'd better be ready to offer them something better in its place. I will. You can't promise that. Watch me. They stood in silence, the air between them charged with tension and something else, a fragile, tentative alliance forming in the wreckage of everything else. Finally, Alaric nodded. Meet me here at 8. Bring your determination and your idealism. You'll need both. He paused at the door. And Elena, thank you for caring enough to fight me on this, even if you're wrong. I'm not wrong. We'll see. He left, and Elena stood alone in the study, the weight of what she'd agreed to settling over her. She was about to dig into a death 4 years old, searching for truth in a house built on secrets. And if Alaric was right, if there was nothing to find, she'd have torn open old wounds for nothing. But if she was right, she looked around the study, at the papers stacked everywhere, the maps of the estate pinned to walls, the ledgers tracking every detail of a life lived through numbers and control, a man trying desperately to hold everything together through sheer force of will. What would she find tomorrow? Evidence of tragedy? Or something darker? Either way, there was no turning back now. The next morning came too quickly. Elena dressed carefully, as if armor could be found in simple wool and cotton. At exactly 8 o'clock, she knocked on the study door. Alaric opened it immediately, looking like he hadn't slept. Ready? As I'll ever be. The estate office was housed in the east wing, a room Elena had never entered. Inside, filing cabinets lined the walls, and a large desk sat covered in ledgers. Alaric unlocked a cabinet with a key from his pocket and pulled out a leather folder. Everything related to Catherine's death is in here. Midwife's notes, physician's report, death certificate, my own journal entries from that time. He handed it to her. I haven't looked at these in 4 years. Couldn't. Elena took the folder carefully. Where will you be? Here, in case you have questions. He sat at the desk, his posture rigid. Take your time. She carried the folder to a chair by the window and opened it. The first document was the death certificate, official and stark. Catherine Thornfield, age 28. Cause of death. Complications from childbirth. Excessive bleeding, fever, failure of vital organs. Date. March 14th. The midwife's notes were more detailed, written in a shaky hand. Labor began at dawn, proceeded normally for 12 hours. Complications arose in late afternoon. Child positioned wrong, mother weakening, sent for physician, arrived 3 hours later. Child delivered successfully after difficult labor, but mother failing. Bleeding would not stop. Fever set in rapidly. Despite all efforts, the Duchess passed just after midnight. Elena read it twice, looking for anything suspicious. But it sounded like a tragic but not uncommon story. Difficult childbirth, complications, a mother who simply didn't survive. The physician's report was more clinical. Patient presented with extreme hemorrhaging post-delivery. Standard interventions attempted. Compression, cold compresses, medicinal herbs. Patient grew increasingly fevered and disoriented. Loss of blood too severe. Death occurred at 12:43 a.m. on March 14th. Cause: puerperal fever and exsanguination. Again, tragic, but nothing that suggested foul play. Then Elena found Alaric's journal entries. His handwriting, usually so precise, was nearly illegible. March 14th. She's gone. How can she be gone? This morning she was here, breathing, alive. Now there's just nothing. The midwife says it happens sometimes. The physician says he did everything he could. But it's not enough. Will never be enough. The girls, how do I tell the girls? How do I look at Beatrice and not see the cost of her birth? March 15th. Couldn't leave the study today. Mrs. Grimsby says I need to make arrangements. I can't think, can't breathe. Catherine is upstairs in our bed, cold and still, and I can't even go to her. What kind of man am I? March 16th. They buried her today. I didn't go. I should have. I know I should have. But the thought of seeing them lower her into the ground while I stand there helpless. I broke. Completely broke. Locked the door. Drank until I couldn't remember her face. What have I become? The entries continued for weeks, increasingly desperate, increasingly dark. Elena's chest ached reading them. This was a man shattered by grief, yes, but also guilt. Soul-deep, corrosive guilt that had clearly poisoned everything since. She was about to close the folder when she noticed something. A note tucked into the back, written on different paper and different handwriting. Your Grace, I know this is difficult, but I must speak with you about the Duchess's death. There are things you should know, things that happened before the physician arrived. Please, we need to talk. M.W. The note was dated a week after Catherine's death. There was no indication it had ever been answered. Elena's pulse quickened. Alaric? He looked up, his face guarded. Yes? Who is M.W.? His brow furrowed. What? She brought him the note. He read it, his expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something darker. Martha Wells, he said quietly. She was a housemaid, helped the midwife during the delivery. Did you ever speak with her? About whatever she wanted to tell you? No, I was not receiving visitors at the time. By the time I emerged from my grief enough to function, she was gone. Quit without notice about a month after Catherine died. He stared at the note. I'd forgotten about this entirely. Do you know where she went? No, Mrs. Grimsby might. Why? Elena's mind was racing. Because someone is making accusations about your wife's death. And here's a maid who wanted to tell you something about that death. Something important enough that she wrote you a note despite knowing you weren't seeing anyone. What if she's the one who went to the magistrate? What if whatever she saw is what's driving this investigation? Alaric stood abruptly. That's speculation. It's a lead. The only one we have. Elena gathered the documents. We need to find her, talk to her, find out what she knows. And if what she knows is damning, then we deal with it. But at least we'll know the truth instead of waiting for it to destroy us. She met his gaze. Unless you don't want to know? He held her stare for a long moment. Then, I'll have Mrs. Grimsby questioned about Martha's whereabouts. If she can be found, we'll find her. I want to be there. When you talk to her. Elena, I need to be there. I need to hear whatever she has to say. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Fine. But if this turns out to be nothing, then we've wasted a day. I can live with that. They found Mrs. Grimsby in the kitchens, overseeing lunch preparations. When Alaric asked about Martha Wells, the housekeeper's face tightened. That girl caused nothing but trouble with her dramatics. Do you know where she is now? Elena asked. Last I heard, she'd taken a position at the Moorland Inn about 10 miles north. Why? Mrs. Grimsby's eyes narrowed. What's this about? Estate business, Alaric said curtly. Have the carriage prepared. We're leaving within the hour. The ride to Moorland Inn was tense and silent. Elena watched the countryside roll past, her mind churning through possibilities. What had Martha Wells seen that day? What had been so important she'd tried to reach a grieving duke who wouldn't see anyone? And why had she left so suddenly afterward? The Moorland Inn was a modest establishment on the edge of a small village. The innkeeper, a round-faced woman with suspicious eyes, confirmed that Martha Wells worked there but was currently in town running errands. Should be back within the hour, she said. You're welcome to wait in the parlor. They waited. Alaric paced. Elena sat by the window watching the street. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, a young woman appeared carrying a basket of vegetables. She was maybe 25, with tired eyes and work-worn hands. When she saw Alaric through the window, she froze. Elena stood. That's her, isn't it? Alaric was already moving toward the door. Martha saw him coming and tried to turn away, but he reached her before she could flee. Miss Wells, a word. The girl's face went white. Your Grace, I didn't... Inside. His voice was harder than Elena had heard it. Now. They commandeered a private dining room. Martha sat with her hands twisted in her apron, refusing to meet Alaric's eyes. Elena positioned herself between them, trying to soften the obvious intimidation. Martha, she said gently, I'm the Duchess, the current Duchess. We're here because we found your note, the one you wrote to the Duke after his wife died. The girl's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean any harm, I swear it. Then tell us what you wanted to say, Elena continued. Whatever it is, we need to know. I can't, he'll... She glanced at Alaric, fear playing on her face. I'm not going to hurt you, Alaric said, though his clenched jaw suggested otherwise. But I need to know what you saw that day, what you wanted to tell me. Martha shook her head, tears spilling over. It's not my place. Someone has gone to the magistrate, Elena said softly. Someone is making accusations about the Duchess's death. If you know something, anything, now is the time to speak. The girl looked up sharply. The magistrate? But I wouldn't... It wasn't you. Alaric leaned forward. Then who? I don't know. I've told no one. I left because I couldn't... She broke off, sobbing now. I couldn't stay in that house knowing what I knew and saying nothing. What did you know? Elena pressed. Please, Martha. Whatever it is, the truth can't be worse than this uncertainty. Martha took a shaky breath. Then, in a whisper, the physician. He was drunk. When he arrived, he could barely stand. The midwife was furious, but what could she do? The Duchess was dying, and he was all we had. She looked at Alaric, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, Your Grace. I wanted to tell you, but everyone said you destroyed yourself with grief. And the physician, he's powerful, respected. Who would believe a housemaid against him? The room went absolutely still. Elena felt the revelation settle like ice in her stomach. A drunk physician, a woman bleeding to death. Interventions that might have worked if performed by steady hands, but failed because... She looked at Alaric. His face had gone gray, his eyes fixed on Martha with an expression of dawning horror. His name, Alaric said, his voice barely audible. "The physician's name." "Dr. Whitmore, Your Grace, from—" "I know who he is." Alaric stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. "He's been the estate physician for 20 years, delivered both my daughters, treated Catherine through both pregnancies." His hand shook. "He was drunk?" "Completely, sir. Reeked of spirits. Hands shaking so bad he could barely hold his instruments. The midwife did her best, but—" Martha's voice broke. "I'm so sorry. If there had been anyone else, if we'd had time to send for another doctor—" But Alaric wasn't listening anymore. He walked out of the room like a man in a trance. Elena turned back to Martha. "Did anyone else know? About his condition?" "The midwife. Maybe some of the other staff who were nearby. But afterward, everyone was told not to speak of it. Dr. Whitmore himself came and said it would only cause unnecessary pain to mention such details. That the Duchess died because of complications, and dwelling on the specifics would help no one. And everyone just agreed? He's a powerful man, Your Grace, treating nobles across 3 counties. Who were we to question him?" Martha wiped her eyes. "But I couldn't live with it, knowing the Duke was blaming himself, destroying himself with guilt, when the truth was—" She couldn't finish. Elena's mind was racing. This was it. The hidden truth. But if Martha hadn't gone to the magistrate, who had? And why now, after 4 years? She found Alaric outside, standing by the carriage, staring at nothing. "Alaric, he killed her." The words came out flat, dead. "All this time, I thought it was fate. Bad luck. Something I should have prevented but couldn't. And instead she died because a drunk physician couldn't do his job properly." "You didn't know. I should have known. Should have checked. Should have smelled it on him. Should have—" His control finally cracked. His fist slammed into the side of the carriage hard enough to split the wood. 4 years. 4 years I've been living like a ghost, teaching my daughters to be ghosts, all because I thought her death was inevitable. And it wasn't. It was preventable. It was murder." Elena grabbed his arm before he could hit the carriage again. "Stop. This isn't your fault." "Isn't it?" "I hired him. Trusted him. Let him anywhere near her." "You had no reason to suspect. None of this is—" A horse galloped into view, the rider pushing hard. As it got closer, Elena recognized Thomas, his face urgent. He pulled up sharply. "Your Grace, thank God I found you. You need to come back, now." "What's happened?" Alaric demanded. "Dr. Whitmore, he's at the manor. He's demanding to see you, and he's—" Thomas glanced at Elena. "He's not alone. He's brought the magistrate and a constable. They're searching the house. They have a warrant for your arrest." The words hit like physical blows. Elena felt the ground tilt beneath her. "On what charge?" she managed. Thomas's face was grim. "Murder. They're saying you killed your wife, Your Grace, and they claim they have evidence to prove it." The ride back to Thornfield Manor felt like racing toward an execution. Alaric sat rigid in the carriage, his jaw clenched so tight Elena thought his teeth might crack. She'd tried to speak to him twice. Both times he'd looked at her with eyes so empty she'd fallen silent. Thomas rode ahead to warn the household. Elena watched the countryside blur past and tried to think. A warrant for murder. Evidence they claimed to have. Dr. Whitmore himself bringing the magistrate to the manor. It was too convenient, too perfectly timed. "They're not here for justice," she said suddenly. Alaric's gaze shifted to her, but he didn't speak. "Think about it. We discover the truth about what happened, about Dr. Whitmore's negligence, and within hours he shows up with a warrant for your arrest? That's not coincidence, that's panic, or preparation." Alaric's voice was hoarse. "Maybe he's known all along that someone would eventually figure it out. Maybe this is his insurance. Accuse me first, make me the villain, bury the truth under a murder charge. Then we fight it. We have Martha's testimony. We have the word of a housemaid against a respected physician, and whatever fabricated evidence he's managed to produce." He looked out the window. "This isn't a fair fight, Elena. It never was. So what, you're just going to let them arrest you? Let him win?" "I'm going to protect my daughters. That's all that matters now." "Your daughters need their father, not a martyr." Elena leaned forward. "Listen to me. We have the truth. That's more than we had this morning. And if Dr. Whitmore is desperate enough to play this card, it means he's afraid. Afraid of what we might find, what we might prove. We use that." "How? I don't know yet. But we don't surrender. Not before we even walk through the door." The carriage pulled up to the manor. Already, Elena could see the chaos. Staff clustered in worried groups, constables moving through the front entrance, and standing in the center of it all like a spider in his web was Dr. Whitmore. He was a man in his 60s, well-dressed, and carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned. Silver hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that didn't reach past his teeth. When he saw the carriage, that smile widened. Alaric climbed out slowly. Elena followed, positioning herself at his side. "Your Grace," Dr. Whitmore said, his voice dripping false sympathy. "What a terrible business this is, terrible. But justice must be served, mustn't it?" "Justice." Alaric's voice was flat. "Is that what you call this?" "I call it long overdue." The physician gestured to a man in formal robes, the magistrate clearly. "Sir Edmund has some questions for you, questions that I'm afraid can no longer be ignored." The magistrate stepped forward, a portly man with nervous eyes. "Duke Thornfield, I have here a warrant for your arrest on suspicion of murder in the death of your late wife, Catherine Thornfield. You are to be detained pending formal charges." "On what evidence?" Elena demanded. "On evidence provided by Dr. Whitmore and corroborated by other testimony." The magistrate wouldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry, Your Grace, but the law is clear. When accusations of this nature are made, they must be investigated." "Accusations made by the very man whose negligence actually caused her death," Elena said loudly enough that the gathered staff could hear. "How convenient." Dr. Whitmore's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon? You heard me. You were drunk the night Catherine Thornfield died. Too drunk to perform your duties. Too drunk to save her life. And now you're trying to frame her husband for your own incompetence." The color drained from the physician's face. "That's slander. Vicious, baseless slander." "Is it? Because we've just spoken to Martha Wells. She was there. She saw you stumbling, reeking of spirits, unable to hold your instrument steady while the Duchess bled to death." Elena looked at the magistrate. "Did Dr. Whitmore mention that in his testimony? Did he tell you he was intoxicated when he arrived to treat a dying woman?" The magistrate's eyes widened. "Dr. Whitmore, is this true?" "Of course not. The girl is lying. The physician's composure cracked. "She's a disgruntled former servant with an axe to grind. You can't believe—" "We can bring her here," Elena interrupted. "Right now. Let her testify in front of everyone. Let the constables and the staff and the magistrate hear exactly what happened that night." "This is absurd." Dr. Whitmore turned to the magistrate. "Sir Edmund, I came here in good faith with legitimate concerns about the Duke's behavior following his wife's death. His refusal to attend her funeral, his complete breakdown, his erratic actions, all of it points to guilt. And I have evidence—" "What evidence?" Alaric's voice cut through like a blade. He stepped closer to the physician, and something in his bearing made the older man step back. "Show us this evidence, now." Dr. Whitmore hesitated, then pulled out a folded paper. A letter, written by the Duchess herself in the weeks before her death, expressing fear of her husband's temper, his controlling nature, his— "Let me see it," Elena said sharply. The physician clutched it. "It's evidence in an official investigation. I can't just—" Elena snatched it from his hand before he could react. She unfolded it, scanned the contents, and felt cold fury wash over her. The handwriting was feminine, delicate, but the words were calculated, designed to paint Alaric as a monster. References to his coldness, his anger, his dark moods that frightened her. It was damning. It was also fake. "This isn't Catherine's handwriting," Elena said. Alaric moved to her side, looking over her shoulder. His face went white. "That's not her hand, not even close." "How can you be certain?" the magistrate asked. "Because I lived with her for 6 years. Because I have dozens of her actual letters upstairs." Alaric's voice shook with rage. "This is a forgery, a crude one. Or you're lying to save yourself," Dr. Whitmore shot back. "A desperate man will say anything." "Then let's test it." Elena folded the letter carefully. "Bring Catherine's real correspondence. Compare the handwriting. Any expert will confirm this is fake." "That will take time," the magistrate said uncertainly. "And in the meantime, you have 2 competing testimonies," Elena pressed. "Dr. Whitmore claims the Duke is guilty based on forged evidence. We claim Dr. Whitmore is covering up his own negligence with false accusations. You can't arrest the Duke without investigating both possibilities." The magistrate looked between them, clearly out of his depth. I suppose that's reasonable, but Dr. Whitmore's standing in the community means nothing if he's a liar and a drunk, Elena said bluntly. She turned to the gathered staff. How many of you were here the night Catherine Thornfield died? Slowly, hesitantly, several hands went up. An older cook, 2 housemaids, a footman. And how many of you noticed Dr. Whitmore's condition when he arrived? Silence. Then the cook stepped forward, her face frightened but resolute. He smelled of gin, Your Grace, strong enough to notice even over the blood in the birthing room. I remember thinking it was odd, but who was I to question a physician? One of the housemaids nodded. His hands were shaking. I saw it when he reached for his instruments. I thought maybe he was nervous, but the footman cleared his throat. I helped him from his carriage. He could barely walk straight. I thought he was tired from a long day, but now... He looked at Dr. Whitmore with dawning horror. You were drunk. The physician's face had gone from pale to red. You're all lying. The Duke has obviously intimidated you into... I've barely spoken to half these people in 4 years, Alaric said coldly, but you're right about one thing. Someone here has been lying, and it's not my staff. The magistrate looked shaken. Dr. Whitmore, these are serious accusations. If there's any truth to them, there isn't. This is a coordinated attack on my reputation. The new Duchess, a woman who's been here mere weeks, suddenly produces a convenient witness and convinces the staff to turn against me? It's transparent. She's trying to protect her husband from justice. Or you're trying to protect yourself from consequences, Elena countered. Tell me, doctor, who else knows about your drinking? How many other patients have suffered because of it? How many other deaths have you blamed on fate or bad luck or the families themselves? How dare you? How dare you? Alaric's voice cracked like a whip. My wife is dead because of you. My daughters grew up without a mother because you were too drunk to save her. And instead of living with that guilt like a man, you tried to frame me for murder. You tried to destroy what's left of my family to cover your own incompetence. I saved countless lives in this county. My reputation is beyond reproach. Is it? Elena turned to the magistrate. Sir Edmund, I suggest you investigate Dr. Whitmore's other cases. Talk to families who've lost loved ones under his care. I suspect you'll find a pattern. And while you're at it, verify that letter's authenticity. I guarantee it's forged. The magistrate looked overwhelmed. This is highly irregular. I came here to arrest the Duke, and now you're asking me to investigate the man who brought me the evidence? I'm asking you to do your job, Elena said. Find the truth, wherever it leads. Dr. Whitmore's composure finally shattered completely. You stupid woman. You have no idea what you've done. I tried to handle this quietly. I gave the Duke a chance to keep his family's name clean, but now... He turned to the magistrate. Arrest her. She's interfering with an official investigation. She's suborning witnesses. She's defending her husband, the magistrate said, and Elena heard steel enter his voice for the first time. Which is her right. Doctor, I think you'd better come with me. We have questions about your conduct that need answering. Constable? The constable, who'd been standing silently throughout, moved forward. Sir? Escort Dr. Whitmore to my offices. He's not under arrest yet, but he's not leaving until we've investigated these claims thoroughly. You can't do this! The physician tried to pull away. I came here to report a crime. Or to commit one, the magistrate said quietly. Either way, we'll get to the bottom of it. Your Grace, he turned to Alaric, you're not under arrest at this time, but don't leave the county until this matter is resolved. Alaric nodded stiffly. I have no intention of going anywhere. They watched as the constable led Dr. Whitmore away, the physician's protests echoing across the grounds. The staff began to disperse, whispering urgently among themselves. The magistrate lingered, his expression troubled. Your Grace, he said to Elena, if what you've claimed today proves true, if Dr. Whitmore was indeed intoxicated and falsified evidence, the ramifications will be severe. But if you're wrong, I'm not wrong, Elena said firmly. I hope not, for all our sakes. He tipped his hat and departed. Silence fell over the manor entrance. Alaric stood motionless, staring at nothing. Elena moved to his side, her own legs shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. You did it, she said softly. You stopped them. You stopped them. He finally looked at her. I was ready to let them take me, to accept it as punishment for failing her. But you, his voice caught, you fought for me. Why? Because someone had to. And because you're not guilty of anything except loving someone so much their loss nearly destroyed you. Elena took his hand. That's not a crime. That's just human. He squeezed her hand, and for the first time since she'd met him, his eyes weren't cold. They were raw, vulnerable, alive with pain and gratitude and something she couldn't quite name. I need to see the girls, he said suddenly. They might have heard the commotion. They'll be frightened. Then let's go to them. Together. They walked through the manor, staff members parting to let them pass. Some looked frightened, others hopeful. All of them were watching their duke with new eyes, a man who'd just been publicly accused of murder and had fought back. At the nursery door, Alaric hesitated. I haven't been in here in months. I don't know if they'll even want to see me. There's only one way to find out. Elena knocked gently. Miss Cartwright opened the door, her face pinched with disapproval. Your Grace? This is highly unusual. The girls are in the middle of their lessons. The girls can have a break from their lessons, Alaric said. His voice was quiet but firm. I need to see my daughters. The governess looked like she wanted to argue. Then she saw his expression and stepped aside. Rosalind and Beatrice sat at their table, books open in front of them. Both looked up as their father entered, their faces identical masks of surprise and wariness. Beatrice, the younger one, was the first to speak. Papa. Her voice was small. Are you all right? We heard shouting. Alaric crossed the room and knelt beside their chairs, bringing himself to their level. Elena watched from the doorway, her heart in her throat. I'm all right, he said. There was some trouble, adult trouble, but it's handled now. Were the constables here to arrest you? Rosalind asked bluntly. That's what Miss Cartwright said, that you might be taken away. Miss Cartwright made a strangled sound. I never said... It's all right, Alaric interrupted. They're old enough to know the truth. He looked back at his daughters. Yes, there was a warrant, but it was based on lies. Your stepmother helped prove that. The constables are gone and I'm staying right here. Because of stepmother? Beatrice turned to look at Elena with wide eyes. She saved you? She did. Both girls stared at Elena now. She felt the weight of their scrutiny, their careful assessment. These were children who'd learned not to trust easily, not to hope for too much. I didn't do it alone, Elena said. Your father fought too. And the staff who testified about what really happened, they were brave. All of us together, we found the truth. About what? Rosalind's voice was sharp. What truth? Alaric took a deep breath. About the night your mother died. About why she died. I've spent 4 years thinking it was just bad luck, fate. Something I should have prevented but couldn't. But I learned today that... He paused, visibly struggling. That the physician who treated her wasn't doing his job properly. That her death might have been preventable if he'd been sober and competent. The room went absolutely silent. Rosalind's face crumpled. Beatrice, who'd been too young to remember much, looked confused. So Mama didn't have to die? Rosalind whispered. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Alaric's voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I couldn't save her. I'm sorry I've been so absent since. I thought keeping distance from everything that reminded me of her would make it hurt less. But it didn't. It just made everything hurt differently, including you. Rosalind stood abruptly, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, Elena thought she might run away. Instead, she threw her arms around her father's neck and sobbed. I missed you, she choked out. I missed you so much. You were alive, but it felt like you were gone too, like we lost both of you that night. Alaric wrapped his arms around her, his own tears finally falling. I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Beatrice climbed down from her chair and joined them, her small arms barely reaching around both of them. Don't go away again, Papa. Please don't. I won't, I promise. I'm here. I'm staying. He pulled back enough to look at both their faces. And I'm going to do better, be better, starting now. Elena watched them, her throat tight. This was what she'd been fighting for. Not just to clear Alaric's name, but to crack open the walls around this family so they could finally reach each other again. Miss Cartwright cleared her throat pointedly. Your Grace, the girls' schedule. Can be adjusted, Alaric said without looking at her. In fact, Miss Cartwright, I think we need to discuss some changes to their education, their daily routine, their entire upbringing, really. The governess stiffened. I hardly think now is the time. Now is exactly the time. He stood, keeping one hand on each daughter's shoulder. You've done your job faithfully for years, and I'm grateful. But I've realized that what I asked you to provide, structure, discipline, control, isn't what my daughters actually need, so things are going to change. I don't understand. I know, and that's part of the problem. His voice was gentle but unyielding. I'll speak with you later about the specifics. For now, the girls are excused from their lessons for the rest of the day. Miss Cartwright's face went white with fury, but she couldn't argue with the Duke in front of his children. She curtsied stiffly and left, her footsteps sharp with disapproval. Rosalind looked up at her father. What kind of changes? Well, Alaric seemed uncertain now, as if he'd made a bold declaration without a plan. I thought, maybe we could start having meals together, all of us, including your stepmother. Really? Beatrice's face lit up. In the big dining room? Or anywhere you'd like. The gardens, Rosalind said suddenly. When the weather's nice, Mama used to have tea in the gardens sometimes. She'd bring blankets and we'd have picnics. Could we do that? Alaric's expression twisted, but he nodded. Yes, we could do that. And the piano, Elena added gently. I think Rosalind would like to continue her lessons on the piano in the music room. Both girls turned to their father, holding their breath. Elena saw him wrestle with it, the pain of opening that room, facing those memories. But then he looked at Rosalind's hopeful face. Yes, he said hoarsely, the music room should be used. Music should be alive in this house again. Rosalind launched herself at him again, nearly knocking him over. Thank you, Papa. Thank you. Thank you. Over the girl's head, Alaric met Elena's eyes. The gratitude there was overwhelming, but also something else. Recognition, understanding, the beginning of something that looked like partnership. Why don't we go see it now? Elena suggested. The music room. All of us together. The walk through the corridors felt different this time, lighter somehow, despite everything that had happened. When they reached the music room door, Alaric paused with his hand on the key. This is going to be hard, he admitted. I haven't been in here since. We know, Rosalind said. She took his other hand. But we're here with you, all of us. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes and golden columns. The covered furniture looked less ominous now, more like things waiting to be rediscovered. Alaric walked to the piano, pulled off the sheet with shaking hands. The instrument gleamed in the light. She loved this piano, he said quietly, played every evening. She wasn't formally trained, but she had natural talent. She'd play while I read, and sometimes she'd sing. Rosalind, you'd sit on her lap and try to reach the keys. Beatrice, you weren't born yet, but she played for you while you were still inside her. Said you'd kick in rhythm with the music. Beatrice moved to the piano reverently. I wish I could remember. I'll help you remember, Alaric said. I'll tell you everything, all the stories I've kept locked away, if you want to hear them. Yes, both girls said in unison. Rosalind sat at the bench and played the melody she'd been practicing, halting and imperfect, but full of earnest effort. When she finished, she looked back at her father nervously. That was one of Mama's songs, she said. I don't know if I played it right. Alaric's face was wet with tears, but he was smiling, actually smiling. It was perfect. They stayed in the music room until the sun began to set, the girls taking turns at the piano while Alaric told stories about Catherine, about her laugh, her stubbornness, her terrible sense of direction, about the time she got lost in their own gardens, and he'd found her an hour later, sitting by the pond, perfectly content. About how she'd cried when Rosalind was born, not from pain, but from joy. Elena watched from the window seat, giving them space but staying close enough to offer support if needed. This was their healing, their reconnection. She was just the catalyst. But when Alaric looked at her across the room, his expression said she was more than that. Much more. As darkness fell, they finally left the music room. The girls were exhausted, emotionally wrung out. Miss Cartwright appeared to take them to bed, her face still pinched with displeasure, but Alaric stopped her. I'll put them to bed tonight, he said. The governess looked shocked. Your Grace, that's hardly appropriate. I'm their father. It's entirely appropriate. He softened slightly. Thank you, Miss Cartwright. We'll discuss the new arrangements tomorrow. For tonight, I have this handled. He took the girls upstairs, and Elena heard their voices fading, Rosalind asking questions, Beatrice giggling at something her father said. Normal family sounds in a house that had been silent for too long. Elena found herself in the library, exhausted and exhilarated, and not quite sure what to do with the tangle of emotions in her chest. The day had started with a death threat and ended with a family beginning to heal. It felt surreal. She didn't hear Alaric enter until he spoke. They're asleep, finally. He closed the door behind him. Rosalind made me promise to tell her more stories tomorrow. Beatrice wants to learn about her mother's favorite foods so we can have them at dinner. I have no idea how to do any of this. You'll figure it out, Elena said. You already started. He crossed the room to where she stood by the window. The moonlight cast shadows across his face, making him look younger somehow, less burdened. I owe you an apology, he said. Several, actually. For how I treated you when you arrived. For the rules I imposed. For fighting you at every turn when all you were trying to do was bring life back to this house. You were protecting yourself. Them. I understand that. Understanding doesn't make it right. He took a breath. You came here as part of a transaction. A business arrangement to save your family. I gave you nothing. No warmth, no kindness, no reason to care about what happened to me or my daughters. And yet you fought for us anyway. Why? Elena considered the question. The honest answer was complicated, tangled up in her own need to matter. To make something good come from the sacrifice she'd made. But there was more to it now. Because someone had to, she said finally. And because the more I saw of this house, the more I realized nobody here was actually living. You were all just existing, going through motions, and I thought... She paused. I thought maybe I could help change that, even if you hated me for it. I never hated you. His voice was soft. I was terrified of you. Terrified? You came in and immediately started asking questions, pushing boundaries, refusing to accept the order I'd imposed. You were chaos in a controlled environment, and chaos meant change, and change meant feeling things I'd spent years trying not to feel. He moved closer. But you were right. About everything. The girls did need more than structure. The house did need warmth, and He stopped, struggling with the words. I needed someone to force me back to life, even when I fought it. Elena felt heat rise in her chest. So where does that leave us? I don't know. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. His palm was warm, calloused from work she hadn't realized he did. This started as a business arrangement, a cold transaction, but it doesn't feel cold anymore. No, she agreed. It doesn't. They stood in the moonlight, hands joined, the silence between them no longer uncomfortable, but charged with possibility. Somewhere in the house, his daughters slept peacefully for the first time in years. Outside, the grounds lay quiet, the drama of the day finally settled. Thank you, Alaric said quietly, for fighting when I couldn't, for seeing what I was too afraid to see, his voice caught, for not giving up on us. I'm stubborn that way. He almost smiled. Then carefully, as if approaching something fragile, he lifted her hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, formal, but the warmth in it was anything but. I'd like to try, he said, to make this a real marriage, not just a transaction, if you're willing. Elena's heart hammered. I'd like that. It won't be easy. I'm still broken in a lot of ways, and there's still the investigation to deal with, the fallout from today. I know, but we'll face it together. She squeezed his hand. That's what partners do. He nodded, something like relief flooding his features. They stood together in the quiet library, two people who'd been thrown together by necessity and found something unexpected in the wreckage. Outside, in the village, the magistrate was questioning Dr. Whitmore under lamplight. The physician was cracking, his story falling apart under scrutiny. By morning, his reputation would be in tatters, and formal charges would be filed, not against the Duke, but against the doctor himself. But Alaric and Elena didn't know that yet. For this moment, they had something simpler. A hand held in darkness, a promise made, a fortress finally beginning to crumble, Not from force, but from the gentle, persistent work of letting light back in. Morning came with unexpected gentleness. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd forgotten to curtain and the distant sound of laughter, actual laughter, echoing from somewhere in the house. For a moment she thought she was dreaming, then she remembered. Yesterday had been real. The confrontation. The truth. Alaric's hand in hers. She dressed quickly and followed the sound to its source. In the breakfast room, Alaric sat at the table with both daughters, all three of them eating together for what was likely the first time in years. Rosalind was telling an animated story, her hands gesturing wildly. Beatrice was giggling, and Alaric was smiling. Not the tight, controlled expression he usually wore, but something genuine and warm. When he saw Elena in the doorway, that smile deepened. "Good morning." "Good morning." She felt suddenly shy, as if everything that had passed between them last night had reset the rules of engagement. "Sit with us," Beatrice said immediately, patting the chair beside her. "Papa says we're having breakfast together every day now, as a family." Elena took the seat, accepting a cup of tea from a maid who looked both pleased and bewildered by this turn of events. The whole household was probably in shock. "Miss Cartwright didn't approve," Rosalind said, her tone conspiratorial. "She said breakfast in the dining room was highly irregular and we should maintain proper decorum in the nursery." "And what did your father say?" Elena asked, already guessing. "That proper decorum could wait until after we'd learned to be a family again," Alaric said. He met Elena's eyes across the table. "I've made a lot of decisions in the past 4 years, most of them wrong. Time to start making better ones." A footman appeared at the door, looking apologetic. "Your Grace, the magistrate is here. He says it's urgent." The warmth at the table evaporated. Alaric's jaw tightened, but he stood. "Show him to my study. I'll be there shortly." "I'm coming with you," Elena said immediately. "Elena, we agreed. Partners. That means I don't sit on the sidelines when things get difficult." He looked like he wanted to argue, but Rosalind spoke up. "Take her, Papa. She's better at fighting than you are." Despite everything, Alaric laughed. "You're not wrong." He offered Elena his arm. "Shall we?" They found the magistrate pacing in the study, looking far less composed than he had yesterday. When they entered, he spun around, relief flooding his features. "Your Grace, Duchess, thank heavens, I wanted to inform you personally before word spreads." He pulled out a sheaf of papers. Dr. Whitmore confessed, last night, to everything. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Everything? His intoxication the night of the Duchess's death, the forged letter, the false accusations, all of it. The magistrate set the papers on the desk. "Once we started investigating, his entire facade crumbled. We found testimonies from other families who'd lost loved ones under suspicious circumstances while in his care. Bar tabs showing a pattern of excessive drinking. Even the forger he paid to create that letter came forward once he realized he could face charges as an accessory." Alaric sank into his chair, his face pale. "So it's over? The criminal investigation against you is closed. Officially. Dr. Whitmore is being charged with criminal negligence, fraud, and obstruction of justice. He'll face trial within the month." The magistrate hesitated. "There will still be questions, Your Grace. Society will talk. But legally, you're clear." "And Catherine?" Alaric's voice broke on her name. "What happens about what he did to her?" "That's more complicated. It's been 4 years. The statute of limitations on medical negligence has passed. We can't charge him for her death directly. But the other charges, they'll put him away for a long time. He'll never practice medicine again. His reputation is destroyed. It's not justice exactly, but it's something. Not justice, just something." Elena saw Alaric absorb that, saw him struggling with the knowledge that the man who'd killed his wife through incompetence would face consequences, but not the ones he deserved. "It's enough," he said finally. "It has to be enough." The magistrate nodded. "There's one more thing. Miss Martha Wells, she's agreed to provide a full deposition about what she witnessed. With your permission, I'd like to include her testimony in the official record, not for criminal proceedings, but for historical accuracy, so that anyone who looks into the Duchess's death in the future will know the truth." "Yes." Alaric's voice was hoarse. "Yes. Let the truth be known." After the magistrate left, they sat in silence. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the gardens where staff were already beginning their daily work. Everything looked the same, but felt fundamentally different. 4 years, Alaric said quietly. I've spent 4 years drowning in guilt, building walls, destroying my relationship with my daughters, all because I thought I'd failed her through weakness or negligence. And now I find out the only thing I failed at was trusting the wrong person. You couldn't have known, couldn't I? Should I have checked him more carefully, insisted on a second physician, been more vigilant? He stood, agitation driving him to pace. The guilt doesn't just disappear because I have someone else to blame now. It just shifts. Elena turned to face him. Then let it shift. Let yourself be angry at Dr. Whitmore instead of yourself. Let yourself grieve what was taken from you instead of what you think you failed to prevent. Those are different things, Alaric, and one of them might actually let you heal. He stopped pacing, his eyes meeting hers. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's possible. I've seen you start already, with the girls, with the music room, with letting yourself feel something other than ice. She crossed to him. Don't stop now. He reached for her hand, gripping it like a lifeline. I don't know how to do this. How to be unfrozen. One day at a time, one decision at a time, starting with the ones right in front of you. Like what? Like what you're going to do about Miss Cartwright. As if summoned, a sharp knock sounded at the door. The governess entered without waiting for permission, her face tight with barely controlled fury. Your Grace, we need to discuss the complete disruption of the household schedule. The children missed their morning lessons. Their routine has been destroyed, and I've been informed you wish to make permanent changes to their education. This is unacceptable. Alaric released Elena's hand and turned to face the woman who'd controlled his daughters' lives for years. You're right. We do need to discuss changes. Miss Cartwright's posture relaxed slightly, clearly thinking she'd won. I'm glad you've come to your senses. Now, if we can just... I'm dismissing you from your position. The room went silent. Miss Cartwright's face went white, then red. I beg your pardon? You've served this family faithfully for years, and I'm grateful, but I asked you to raise my daughters according to principles that were fundamentally wrong. I asked you to prioritize control over connection, discipline over joy, structure over life. You did exactly what I asked. That's not your fault. It's mine. But it needs to change, and you've made it clear you don't believe in the changes I'm making. You're dismissing me because I believe in proper education, because I maintain standards? I'm dismissing you because my daughters need something different now, something you can't provide. Not because you're incapable, but because your philosophy and mine no longer align. His voice softened slightly. I'll provide excellent references. 3 months' salary in addition to what you're owed, and my sincere thanks for your service. This is that woman's doing. Miss Cartwright turned her fury on Elena. You've been here less than a month and you've destroyed everything. The order, the discipline, the proper running of this household. I've helped restore a family, Elena said quietly. If that looks like destruction to you, maybe my husband is right about your philosophy. The governess drew herself up. You'll regret this, both of you. Those children need structure. Without it, they'll become wild, undisciplined, unmanageable. You're doing them a disservice. Or we're finally doing them a service, Alaric said. Thank you, Miss Cartwright. Mrs. Grimsby will arrange your departure. She left in a storm of indignation, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Alaric let out a long breath. That's been coming for years. I should have done it long ago. You did it now. That's what matters. Elena smiled. What will you do about their education? I have no idea. Hire a new governess, a tutor? Let them run wild until I figure it out? How about asking them what they want? He blinked. That's actually a good idea. Why didn't I think of that? Because you're new at this whole treating your children like people with opinions thing. But you're learning. The next few days brought more changes, each one chipping away at the fortress Thornfield Manor had become. The music room was officially reopened, and a piano teacher from the village was hired to give Rosalind proper lessons. Beatrice discovered a love for gardening and could be found most afternoons helping Thomas plant flowers in the previously neglected beds. Meals became family affairs, often chaotic and occasionally argumentative, but always warm. And slowly, so slowly Elena almost didn't notice, Alaric began to thaw. It wasn't dramatic, there was no single moment of transformation. But she'd catch him laughing at something Rosalind said. Or find him sitting in the gardens with Beatrice, listening patiently as she explained the difference between perennials and annuals. Or discover him in the music room late at night, just sitting and listening to the silence that was no longer quite so heavy. A week after the magistrate's visit, Elena found a letter on her breakfast plate. The handwriting was unfamiliar, feminine, and elegant. She opened it carefully. Dear Duchess Thornfield, you don't know me, but I knew your husband's first wife, Catherine. We were friends as girls before she married. I've only recently heard about the truth of her death and the investigation that followed. I wanted to write to tell you something Catherine told me shortly before she died. She said she was frightened, not of her husband, as that horrid forged letter suggested, but of losing herself in grief and isolation. Her first pregnancy had been difficult, and she struggled with dark thoughts afterward. She worried about the second pregnancy, about whether she'd be strong enough, brave enough. But she also told me about the man she married, how kind he was beneath the stern exterior, how much he loved her and their daughter, how safe she felt with him, even when she didn't feel safe with herself. I thought you should know that. Know that whatever darkness has surrounded this family since her death, it wasn't born from cruelty or malice, just grief. Human, terrible grief. Catherine would be glad you're there now. She worried about what would happen to Alaric and Rosalind if something happened to her. She made me promise to check on them if the worst occurred. But I was living abroad, and by the time I returned, the household was so closed off, I couldn't get near. Thank you for opening it back up, for fighting for them, for giving them a chance to heal. With gratitude and respect, Lady Margaret Ashford, Elena read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words. Then she took it to Alaric, who was in his study reviewing estate accounts. You need to read this, she said simply. He did. She watched his face as he absorbed Catherine's words, filtered through her friend's memory. Watched him learn that his wife hadn't been afraid of him, that she'd loved him, that she'd wanted him to be happy if she was gone. When he finished, he set the letter down carefully and covered his face with his hands. His shoulders shook. Elena moved to his side, resting her hand on his shoulder. She loved you, she trusted you, and she'd want you to keep living. I know. His voice was muffled. I think I've known that for a while, but knowing and accepting are different things. Then accept it now. Let yourself believe you deserve to move forward. He lowered his hands, his face wet, but his eyes clearer than she'd ever seen them. I want to show you something. He led her out of the study, through the corridors, up to a part of the house she'd never visited. They stopped at a door that was clearly to a bedroom, larger than hers, grander, with carved wood and brass fixtures. This was our room, he said. Catherine's and mine. I haven't been inside since the night she died. Couldn't face it, but I think... He took a breath. I think it's time. He opened the door. The room inside was frozen in time. Clothes still hung in the wardrobe. Books sat on the nightstand. The bed was made with precision, as if waiting for someone who would never return. It smelled of dust and old memories. Alaric walked to the window and pulled open the curtains. Light flooded in, making the dust motes dance. I had the staff maintain it but never change anything. Like a museum to what we had. He turned to Elena. That was wrong. She wasn't a museum piece. She was a person who lived and loved and would hate to see her memory turned into a shrine. What do you want to do? Pack up her things. Give her clothes to people who need them. Keep some items for the girls. Things they can have when they're older. Clear the room out and... He paused. And make it ours, if you're willing. Elena's breath caught. You're asking me to move into your late wife's room? I'm asking you to help me turn it into our room. Not hers, not mine. Ours. He moved closer. I know this started as a transaction. I know I gave you every reason to hate me. But Elena, you're not a business arrangement to me anymore. You're my partner, my wife, the person who fought for my family when I couldn't fight for myself. And I want... His voice roughened. I want a real marriage, not just proximity and obligation, but something built on choice, on trust, on... Love? Elena supplied softly. I don't know if I'm capable of that yet. I'm still figuring out how to feel anything without being terrified of it. He took her hands. But I'm willing to try. If you are. Elena looked around the room, at the shrine to a dead woman, at the man who'd built walls so high he'd nearly disappeared behind them, at the possibility of something new growing in the ruins of something lost. Yes, she said. I'm willing. They spent the afternoon sorting through Catherine's belongings together. It was hard, emotional work. Alaric would pick up a dress and tell Elena the story of when Catherine wore it. A piece of jewelry would trigger a memory of a party, a conversation, a moment of joy. But he didn't break. He didn't hide from the memories. He let them come, let them hurt, and then let them pass. By evening, the room was mostly cleared. The girls had been invited to choose items they wanted to keep. Rosalind took a music box, Beatrice a silk scarf. The rest would go to charity or storage. Standing in the empty room, Elena could finally see its bones. The beautiful architecture, the windows that overlooked the gardens, the fireplace large enough to heat the space on cold nights. It could be beautiful again. Different, but beautiful. What are you thinking? Alaric asked. That this room has good light, and it's big enough for a sitting area by the window. And maybe, she smiled, maybe we could paint it something other than gray? He laughed, actually laughed. I think that can be arranged. They had dinner that night in the gardens, despite the evening chill. Thomas had helped set up a table outside, and Cook had prepared Catherine's favorite meal, the girls' request. It was both celebration and memorial, joy and grief mixed together in a way that felt honest. Rosalind played the piano afterward, her skill improving daily. Beatrice fell asleep in her father's arms, content and secure. And Elena watched them all, this family she'd been sold into and had somehow claimed as her own. Later, after the girls were in bed, she and Alaric walked through the gardens in the moonlight. Lady Ashford's letter mentioned Catherine struggled after Rosalind was born, Alaric said quietly. I knew she had difficult days, times when she couldn't get out of bed, when everything felt too heavy. But I didn't realize how dark it got for her. I thought I was protecting her by not asking too many questions, giving her space. But maybe I should have pushed more, been more present. You did the best you could with what you knew, Elena said. That's all anyone can do. Is it enough? It has to be. Otherwise, we'd all be paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes. They walked in silence for a while, the garden peaceful around them. Finally, Alaric spoke again. I don't think I've said thank you properly. For everything. For refusing to accept the walls I built. For fighting Dr. Whitmore. For helping me see my daughters as people instead of responsibilities. For... He stopped walking, turning to face her. For making me want to live again, instead of just exist. Elena stepped closer. You're welcome. Though I think you give me too much credit, you did the actual work. I just pushed a little. You pushed a lot. Relentlessly. Thank God for that. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle and careful. I'm going to try very hard not to mess this up. This second chance at having a family, at being a husband, at actually living in this house instead of haunting it. You won't mess it up. I might. Probably will, honestly. I'm still learning how to be human again. Then we'll learn together. Elena rose on her toes and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative, nothing like the dramatic first kisses in the novels she'd read, but it was real. And it was theirs. When they pulled apart, Alaric was smiling. That was nice. Just nice? I'm out of practice. Give me time to work up to wonderful. She laughed, and the sound carried across the gardens, echoing off the stone walls of Thornfield Manor, walls that no longer felt like a prison, but like protection, like home. The weeks that followed brought more changes. A new tutor was hired, one who believed in education through exploration rather than rigid memorization. The household schedule was relaxed, allowing for spontaneity and laughter. Rooms that had been closed for years were opened and aired out. The manor began to feel lived in again, warm and chaotic and real. Dr. Whitmore's trial became the scandal of the county. Other families came forward with their own stories of negligence and mistakes covered up. The physician who'd been so respected, so untouchable, was stripped of his credentials and sentenced to 10 years in prison. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Martha Wells was offered her old position back, but she declined politely. She'd built a new life at the inn and was happy there. But she visited once, and Alaric thanked her personally for having the courage to speak the truth, even when it was dangerous. Lady Margaret Ashford visited as well, bearing more stories about Catherine. The girls devoured these eagerly, building a more complete picture of the mother they'd lost. Alaric listened too, occasionally adding his own memories, slowly learning to speak about his first wife without pain being the only emotion attached. Elena watched it all with quiet satisfaction. This was what she'd fought for. Not perfection, not some fairy tale ending, but real life. Messy, complicated, beautiful life. 6 months after their wedding, Elena and Alaric stood together in the newly painted bedroom. Their bedroom now, decorated in soft blues and warm whites instead of oppressive grays. It felt like theirs, like a new beginning. "I've been thinking," Alaric said as they prepared for bed, "about my father, about the man he was, cold, distant, controlling. I swore I'd never be like him. But after Catherine died, I became exactly what I feared. Worse, maybe. But you changed," Elena pointed out. "That's the difference. You recognized it and changed. Because you didn't let me do anything else." He pulled her close. "I'm still working on it. Being present, being open, being the father and husband I should be. Some days are harder than others. That's normal. Healing isn't linear." "When did you become so wise?" "I've always been wise. You were just too stubborn to notice." He laughed and kissed her, and this time it was more than nice. It was wonderful, the kind of wonderful that suggested they were building something real and lasting from the ruins of everything that had come before. Downstairs in the music room, Rosalind's piano sat waiting for tomorrow's lesson. In the gardens, the flowers Thomas and Beatrice had planted were beginning to bloom. In the kitchen, Cook was already planning the next family meal. And throughout the house, staff moved with lighter steps, their faces less pinched, their interactions less fearful. Thornfield Manor was coming back to life. Slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably. And in the bedroom that had once been a shrine to loss, two people who'd been thrown together by desperation were choosing to stay together by design. Building a marriage not on transaction or obligation, but on trust earned, battles fought together, and the stubborn refusal to let coldness win. Outside, spring was turning to summer. The days grew longer, warmer. The estate flourished under Alaric's renewed attention, and the household flourished under the partnership he and Elena had forged. It wasn't perfect. Some days Alaric still retreated into his study, overwhelmed by emotion or memory. Some days the girls fought or cried or struggled with the loss of their mother. Some days Elena wondered if she'd done enough, pushed too hard, broken things that couldn't be fixed. But they faced those days together, as a family. And that made all the difference. One evening, nearly a year after Elena had arrived at Thornfield Manor in a borrowed wedding dress with nothing but debt and desperation driving her, she stood at the window of their bedroom and looked out at the gardens below. The sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. From somewhere in the house, she could hear Rosalind playing piano. Beatrice's laughter echoed from the nursery, and behind her Alaric was reading, occasionally glancing up to smile at her for no reason except that she was there. This was what she'd fought for, this warmth, this life, this stubborn, imperfect, beautiful thing they'd built together from ice and ashes. "What are you thinking?" Alaric asked, setting aside his book. Elena turned to him, this man who'd been a stranger a year ago, a wall 6 months ago, and was now her partner in every sense of the word. "That I'm glad I didn't give up." "On me or on yourself?" "Both." He stood and crossed to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. Together they looked out at the estate. His by birth, hers by marriage, theirs by choice. "I'm glad too," he said quietly. "For the stubbornness, the fighting, the refusal to let me destroy everything out of fear." "You're welcome." She leaned back against him. "Though I still think you give me too much credit. You did the hard work. We did the hard work. Together." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And we're not done yet. There's still so much to figure out, the girls' futures, the estate's management, how to keep building this thing we've started." Sounds exhausting. Sounds like life, actual life, not the half-dead existence I was living before. Elena turned in his arms. "Then let's live it, all of it. The messy, complicated, beautiful chaos of being actual people instead of ghosts." "Deal." They sealed it with a kiss, and outside the sun finished setting, and inside Thornfield Manor, a family who'd been shattered began their evening together, eating, laughing, arguing, living. The fortress had fallen, but something better had risen in its place. Something warm, something human, something real. And for the woman who'd entered that cold house with nothing but determination and a borrowed dress, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.